Our learning goal for today is I can subtract fractions with unlike denominators. When you subtract fractions, you follow the same steps that you do when you're adding fractions with unlike denominators, except you subtract instead of add. So let's take a look at the problem 9/10 minus 2/5. The first thing I need to do is to make sure I have a common denominator. So I need to list my multiples of 5 and 10 and find the least common multiple. So if I started counting by 5s, 5, 10, 15, and if I started counting by 10s, 10, 20, I'd realize that my least common multiple is 10. So I would need to change both fractions to have a denominator of 10. So the first one, I need to make an equivalent fraction. 9/10 equals something over 10. Well, because the denominators are the same, I would multiply by 1, and I would still have the same fraction that I began with. 2/5, however, I go from 5 to 10, I'd have to multiply by 2. And what I do on the bottom, I must do on the top. So I would have 2 times 2 is 4. So then the second thing I do is just subtract. So I subtract 9 minus 4 is 5. And my 10, I would just carry down, so my denominator would stay the same. The last step is to simplify if needed. Well, I actually will need to simplify this one because there's something that I can divide into 5 and 10. So I can divide by 5. Same rule still applies. What I do on the top, I have to do on the bottom. So I have 5 divided by 5 is 1, and 10 divided by 5 is 2. So my answer to the question, 9/10 minus 2/5, would be 1/2. Mario fills a hummingbird feeder with 3/4 cup of sugar water on Friday. On Monday, Mario sees that 1/8 cup of sugar water is left. How much sugar water did the hummingbirds drink? The first thing I should ask myself is, will this be an addition question or a subtraction question? So I have to take a look at what the question is stating. 3/4 cup of sugar water is what I began with. Then the hummingbirds drank some of the sugar water, and 1/8 cup of sugar water is left. So because I took away from the whole, I will have to subtract. So 3/4 minus 1/8 will be my problem. Well, if you notice, the denominators are different, so I have to make a common denominator. I do that by finding a common multiple. So let's list the multiples of 4. 4, 8, well, I can stop there because I know the first multiple of 8 would match. So now my common denominator would be 8. So I need to make an equivalent fraction. 3/4 equals another fraction that has an 8 on the bottom. So to get from 4 to 8, I multiply by 2, and what I do on the bottom, I must do on the top. So I'll have 6/8. And on the bottom, 1/8, in order to get from 8 to 8, well, I simply just multiply by 1, or I could just leave my fraction the same, because anything by 1 multiplied by 1 is going to be the same thing. So now I have to subtract. I subtract my numerator, 6 minus 1 would be 5, and my denominator, the whole, stays the same. So I still have an 8 on the denominator. So now 6/8 minus 1/8 would be 5/8. Let's take a look at another problem. 9/10 minus 1/4. My denominators are not the same, so I have to find a common denominator. So the first thing I'll do is I have to list my multiples of 10 and a 4. So I'm going to start with 4, and I'm going to use my knowledge of my multiples of 10 when I'm counting by 4 to know when to stop. So 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. I know I can stop at 20 because my knowledge of 10s is going to be, I already know the multiples of 10, so 20 is going to be part of it. So 20 will be my match. So 20 is my new denominator, and I need to make equivalent fractions from 9/10 and 1/4 with the denominator of 20. So in order to get from 10 to 20, I have to multiply by 2. And as we know, what we do on the bottom, we have to do at the top. So my new fraction would be 18/20. On the bottom, 1/4, I would have to multiply by 5, so I would get 5/20. So now if I subtract, 18 minus 5 is 13, and my denominator stays the same. 13/20 is my new fraction, is my answer. So now I have to think, do I need to simplify this fraction? Well, if I think about a 13, I know the only two factors of 13 are 1 and 13 because it's a prime number. So there's nothing that can divide into 13 and 20. So 13/20 is my final answer. 9/10 minus 1/4 equals 13/20. Let's try one more practice problem. Caden ate 6/8 of a small pepperoni pizza on Monday and 1/2 of a pizza on Tuesday. How much more of a pizza did she eat on Monday than on Tuesday? So I know it's subtraction because it says how much more of a pizza did she eat on Monday than on Tuesday. So because I'm comparing two numbers, I know I'll need to subtract. So 6/8 minus 1/2. I have to find my common multiple. So I can start listing the multiples of 2. 2, 4, 6, 8. I know I can stop there because my first multiple of 8 is going to be 8. So 8 will be my match. So 8 is my new common denominator. So now I have to write an equivalent fraction. 6/8 will still be 6/8 because I would do times 1 and it would still be the same fraction. On 1/2, however, I would multiply times 4 on the bottom and times 4 on the top, and so my answer would be 4/8. So then I would subtract. 6 minus 4 is 2, and my denominator would stay the same. So my answer for 6/8 minus 4/8 would be 2/8. Well, I need to remember my last step of simplifying. I can simplify this problem because it does have two even numbers, and if they're both even, I know I could divide by 2. So I could divide this one by 2 and divide the bottom by 2. So my answer would now be 1/4. So 6/8 minus 1/2 equals 1/4. I'd like for you to try two practice problems on your own. Remember the steps. You need to find a common denominator, then make equivalent fractions, then subtract the fractions. The first problem I want you to do is 3/4 minus 1/8. And the second problem is 7 2/3 minus 6 1/6. If you have any questions, be sure to write them down on your note-taking page. I'll see you in class tomorrow.